Hello, I'm Thomas Hare, Chief Content Officer of the Performance Driven Marketing Institute, a not-for-profit trade association that serves companies in the performance and direct consumer marketing world. Welcome to the latest episode of Take 20, our final episode of Take 20 in 2021, created by the PDMI's Brand Response Council. These 20-minute live conversations feature leaders in the performance marketing world speaking about the hottest topics in the industry and are scheduled twice a month. Before we get to today's conversation, I just wanted to let you know that we'll be addressing any questions from the audience at the end of today's session. You don't have to wait to ask them. On the control panel, you'll see a questions tab, and you can type and send your question in to us. We'll be collecting them, and we'll try to get to as many as possible in the final moments of the episode. Today's episode is the 7th and final in our Back To series under the title Back to You. These great members of the Brand Response Council you see on your screen today are here to take a look back at 2021. What key learnings have they taken away that's helped them in work and in life? What questions would they like the council to explore more deeply? As always, we're joined by our host, Modern Postcard's Chris Foster, Chair of the Brand Response Council, for this final look back on 2021. And joining him today are these members of the Brand Response Council. I'm just going to go in the order of the screen that I see you. There's Doug Bogner of Apex Media, Shira Whittleson of RSLT, Dan Kelly of Dish Media, and Ron Hadler of Red Door Interactive. Unfortunately, Kevin Hayes from American Target Network and Jim Norton of Flowcode are unable to join us today, stuck at these weird things called client lunches. I didn't know these still happened. Nonetheless, we have a great group, so we're looking forward to what they've got to say. Team, take it away. Thanks.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Thomas, for the introduction, and thanks, everybody, for being on. And welcome to begin thinking about 2022 and to look back at 2021. It's a human instinct at the end of the year to kind of do some reflection. I do think it's interesting why we do it. I mean, you could reflect any time of the year, but for some reason at the end of the year, we're programmed for these calendars, right, where we have a New Year's resolution or we look back in the year in review. So might as well jump on that human instinct here with this group. And what we wanted to talk about was all the things that we've learned, because you learn something every year, but the last couple of pandemic years have been so different that if you didn't come away with some kind of learning or insight, or if you didn't come away with a different perspective, then that's not quite what I think we wanted to do, right? You have to come out of this with learning. We have to come out of it with a different way of thinking about work and our world and ourselves, because that's what these kind of big global shifts do. These things just change us, and it becomes a generational marker for all of us, ourselves, our children, our parents. We all go through these pandemic years. And so we're going to talk about that, how it affects our life, how it affects the workplace, and some lessons coming out of it. So I'm going to go around the room, and the two questions that I asked everybody to think about was, one, what was one piece of literature or article or a book or some kind of insight that you picked up from someone that you'd like to share? And two, what was a surprising lesson from last year that you didn't expect that you can bring it home to? So I'm going to go last, but the person on to my right on the screen is Doug Bogner, hailing from Indiana today. So Doug, we're going to go to you first, and what I'd like you to do is just to kind of answer those two questions and talk through it.
Well, I have become a devotee. I always have followed the analysts. I spend a lot of my time paying attention to the media and how that's all changing. And Alan Wolk is a guy at TV Rev and has a column that I think is spot on a weekly basis. I love his approach to understanding the marketplace and what's happening from both the viewership perspective as well as the platforms themselves. So I can't say that's one piece of reading that I've done. It's something that's updated on a weekly basis. And I'm sorry, what was the second question, Chris? I forgot it already.
No, that's fine. The second question was, what was a surprising lesson from 2021, one that you didn't expect to learn?
Yeah, it's all COVID related for me and continues to be.
Okay.
But it's the way that I think consumers interact with marketers now, and the three things that they demand from a marketer. It's convenience, it is safety, based on, the delivery method during the transaction, whether it's contactless or delivered directly to your door in some way. But then the really key and interesting aspect of it that came to me was the expectation from the part of the consumer that that whomever they're doing business with align with that person's thoughts on a social and environmental value perspective. That to me is becoming much more consideration when making a purchase. So it's, COVID still continues to color a lot of our interactions. You mentioned it earlier here, these client lunches. I haven't heard of that in a long time. So, but those are the kind of the takeaways that I have from a consumer perspective.
That's it. That's awesome. It's interesting where that last piece, alignment with personal values, and I mean, we're not going to dive into the politics of it, but what we all recognize is that COVID has become a political issue. Mm-hmm. Like the pandemic became political, which is interesting. And so when you talk about how COVID, overlays consumer behavior with convenience, safety, and alignment with personal values, it's true, right? It's a very interesting thing how that interplayed and that blended in together, especially then from the consumer having a choice of whether they want to align with their personal values with different brands. Mm-hmm. And what an interesting thing that's going to be moving forward.
And it's a very delicate relationship that a marketer has to toe the line to. So it's changed that interaction greatly.
And I think it's going to change it forever. And we can have an entire episode on that. but we can't. So Ron, I'm going to go down to you because you're in the corner with your fantastic holiday shirt. Just look impeccable today. So do tell.
Yeah. I think kind of looking back, the things that surprised me, is just the amount of introspection, maybe reflection that took place in 2021. And maybe that's not a big surprise for everybody else, but most people are way too busy to really have the time for solid reflection, or at least the amount of time to reflect. And in 2020, we were just trying to get through it and survive. And the promise of the vaccines and things getting better, and then as they happened, we had all this time to reflect and really understand things maybe in a different light. And some of those things that came out, it was a lot of labels, and the Great Resignation, the pandemic years, boomers versus millennials, and really, I think about it as the great pause. People had this time to really understand what's important. Mm-hmm. And they decided to quit their jobs and do something different. And sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad, but they had the time, and they're making things that are more important. I've talked to a lot of folks who essentially, it's like, I'm not going back. I'm got more time to spend with my kids. I get to pick them up from school. I get to take them to school. I get to fix those lunches. And that's just been that really important time. And they reflected on that. And that's at the top of their list, And I think when I transitioned to more of something great I read, I read it back in January of this year, was kind of paradoxical thinking. And that's the concept that we can hold two different things in our mind at the same time. And it's a both and situation versus an either or. And really having both of those things, so I can have a great career and I can have all the time I need for my family. And I think that's kind of where we've kind of landed. And people, we're not going back. And I think, there's still those folks who are looking forlornly back at 2019 going, why can't we have more client lunches? And the thing is that, we work in a more distributed environment. I have folks all over the country, and I spend more time with them now, and them not feeling like they're left out because they're just on a speakerphone, but I've got them face to face. I think I have more FaceTime now with my employees than I had before. So I think, we're doing great. We're moving forward, we're looking ahead, and I think it's kind of the resilience of the human spirit. So yeah, more time to reflect, and I think we've risen up.
Love it. Freaking mic drop. I love it. And what I love so much about it, Ron, is your optimism. Right, the optimism of the resiliency, the optimism of finding ways to stay connected to a team, that could be remote. One of the things that they did note about, I was listening to it on Marketplace, Kai Risdahl was talking about it, where executives now have actually more FaceTime with junior level employees than they ever did before. Because in a building, especially if you're on different floors, you never see anybody in a different floor. But now executives can have these virtual water coolers where they see people and have a lot more interaction than they did. I think that was so insightful to bring up the paradoxical thinking and the changes of priorities. And hopefully it speaks to a more pliant approach that people have mentally to balancing work and life and to planning their futures. That was wonderful. Great insight, Ron. All right, Dan, you got some big shoes to follow up with. I know you can bring it because you got big feet too. So bring it.
Which question you want first? From a reading standpoint, I'd say throughout the year it's been great just reading about the increased acceptance of impression-based buying. As you know, it's getting more and more traction in the TV space. That digital mindset of an impression versus a rating. It continues to grow, and it's great because whether it's addressable or in targeted, it's something that we've been doing for so long, but now it's finally in the market loud enough. Part of that driven by some changing going on in the the measurement space, and challenges being laid out to like Nielsen and so forth. There's just been that much more chatter about really making sure you're delivering your message to who you need and not necessarily just a good unit rate on a show that's going to reach a wide audience, because it really comes down to who you need to reach. So, across numerous trades, it's been great seeing how much that's growing. And then from a learnings perspective, a shocking learning from the year, I would say, has been, I got two for you. One, definitely to build off of Ron, the use of technology to do our business. Being able to meet with clients all over in lieu of hopping on a plane and doing all the travel that had been customary. Being able to get 30 minutes of FaceTime like this with clients all over the country from your home or your office has been great, and it's been definitely useful. Mm-hmm. With that said, there is definitely something to be said about being in person. And over the last couple of weeks, couple of months, even last night, we had a great client event, at a restaurant, and just seeing faces that we haven't seen in so long. There's something to be said about that. So it's going to be about finding that balance, right? The easiness of and convenience of tech, but making sure that we don't lose sight of the personal connection is definitely going to help move the business forward. And then the other shocking lesson I would say is just the level to which some companies have embraced change versus others that are still trying to just stay steadfast in their ways on things like measurement, right? It's not just about logs and spikes in call volume, because without a doubt, and I think accelerated over the pandemic, is behaviors have changed when it comes to TV consumption, when it comes to shopping online or going to stores. This has really caused such a huge shift. So we have to shift our mentality around the measurement of that, all of that, and the attribution of all of that. And some agencies and clients that seem to be maybe smaller or just newer to the game seem a little quicker to adapt to that change, while others that are just leaders in so many ways in our industry are still a little reluctant to that change. So that was definitely a big surprise, and it was shocking, but I'm definitely glad to see that more and more folks the light's going on, and the acceptance of the need to how we measure everything needs to evolve with the way people are consuming everything.
Well, and that's so interesting, Dan, because human beings and consumers are going to change they're going to change on a dime, right? They're going to follow the devices. They're going to, buy online, pick up in store. They're going to shop on TV. They're going to buy from their phones. They're going to do that so much faster than the industry can respond to. They just will, right? And we will follow what the consumer behavior is going to be. But what I think is so insightful for you is that you look into the cultures of the organizations that changed versus didn't change, right? Because everyone had the same opportunity to adjust, right? The technology is relatively ubiquitous, right? The talent's out there. So there has to then, because that's the curious part of that, is what culturally is different from one organization that changes versus another, right? What are those things that block a company that's slow to change versus the ones who are fast to change seem to be kind of unfettered or unfazed by making those adjustments?
It's a mindset across the board at all levels within an organization. As simple from, we saw a lot of change around the acceptance or even trying OTT in the CTV space, right? I mean, it's very comforting and easy to continue doing what works.
Right.
There's risk involved in trying something new. And listen, this is a difficult time to take risks, right? With everything going on. But those that did take those risks and kind of were willing to try out, they saw the results. Because to your point about the consumers change so quickly, if we don't take those risks, we're going to be missing out because they really are. Consumer behavior has changed quickly, and I think it's changed for the long term.
I think it's changed forever too. Absolutely right. And culturally it does. It goes all the way through an organization, right? And that's if you're a circle, you hire circles. If you're a square, you hire other squares, right? And after the generations of circles or generations of squares, you have circles and squares, right? Very, very different cultures. Interesting. All right, Shira, you're up.
Yeah. So I have two pieces of literature that I read. One of them is by Jim Elms. It's about a world gone dark. What happened to brands, when there's no any more budget, what they can do about that. So it's really, really interesting, and I really recommend to read that. Another one is, and by the way, that one is channeling what Ron Adler said about the pause, of 2020. So it's really interesting read. The second one is from the Harvard Business Review. It's about how AI changed the way we work.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really interesting to see how machine learning is becoming a mainstream, and I love it because, this is what we do, and it's really becoming more and more out there. So it's an article that I really recommend to read. So in terms of surprise, in 2020, back to 2020, August 2020, I wrote a post on Medium about how COVID has impacted consumer awareness of privacy back to now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Things are going crazy. There's around 17 states that have implemented legislation related to privacy. We did a survey in a few months ago, and I don't think I talked about it here, but we did a survey on privacy related to smart TVs, and we had around 360 responders across the US, and 86% of them said that they will opt out from their smart TV tracking if they will know how to do it. So things are becoming, yes, this is really interesting stuff. So there's definitely a trend here that's, I'm sure it's going to continue to increase, but it's definitely exploded in 2021.
That's true. It's so interesting you say that, Shira. So we were with a family in Thanksgiving, and She Who Must Not Be Named, that's a small little device that's made by a very large company named after a river in South America. But we were looking at dresses for my daughter's formal and talking about stuff. And then a couple of minutes later, my other daughter, on her phone gets an ad for a blue dress because we were just talking about it a handful of minutes later, you know. And we looked at she who must not be named, and we were like, really? All right, whatever. So it's out there, and the data issues and the data privacy issues, I think, will continue. And I think that, you know, talking about where, you know, all of them talked about changing priorities, the alignment of personal values, the way in which consumer behaviors changed, and now in the privacy, I think all of that is going to be blending in together. So ultimately, consumers are going to be making those choices. And I love, Dan, when you talked about making sure you're, you know, sending those impressions and the messages to the people who you need to reach. I think humans and consumers are going to self-select even more. So it's going to be less broadcast and much more focused. And they'll be receiving the messages, not only who they want to, you know, from the brands they want to get the messages from, and maybe only those brands. So it'll be curious to see. Great stuff, guys. I'll finish up and I'll bring it home with mine. So the big surprise for me was that because, you know, Dan, you had talked about meeting clients, you know, virtually, and Ron, you had mentioned about talking with your teams. I mean, at least for 1, 2, 3, 4 out of the 5 participants here were in our homes. I think that seeing a home life, professionally, personally, whether it's a client or a vendor or a business partner or a colleague, makes a big difference in seeing that person as a person. And Dan, you had mentioned what it's like to see people face to face and have dinners. And you guys all know this stuff. If you go to one of the best reasons you go to a conference or a business conference like PDMI is to see people. Right? The education's great, but you go to see people, right? And you meet people on a personal level. You talk about kids, you talk about life, and yeah, there's work, but there's people, right? And I think that, you know, business lunches introduced that. I think that having cameras in people's homes invites you in to learn about them as people, and I think that that's a good thing. I think professionally and personally moving forward. But that was a surprise. I didn't expect that. My one reading item, and I've just been getting through it recently, so I haven't even squeezed out all that I want. It's called The Human Element, and it speaks to the idea of forces of fuel and friction within an organization. And everyone wants to pour more fuel, like marketing and sales, but the friction is really where a lot of growth can happen. And I think Dana touches exactly on what you spoke about with some organizations having a challenge with change. That's all internal friction. That's all it is. It's the frictions within an organization that block them from making those adjustments. So anyway, I'm really excited to get through the rest of this book because it really reveals the fundamentals of how organizations can grow. One of the analogies they use is how a bullet is pushed through, and people think it's gunpowder that pushes it through, but it's actually the aerodynamics, right? And there's a force of the push, but it's the aerodynamic as it goes through, and so that's really where the big friction is. And it's tough to find those points of friction, and sometimes it's really difficult internally to own up to them and to identify them, but that could be a catalyst for growth. So anyway, that's great. Great stuff. Wow, we're 11:25. You guys are awesome. Such great insight. I'm so glad we're recording this, right? I mean, these are good thoughts to store into the vault. Thomas, John, if you guys want to come in, are there any questions at all from anyone?
Yeah, I got a couple here to go through, at least one, depending on how long the round robin goes. The first one, if there was one thing in your day-to-day business pre-pandemic that you could do then but are not doing now, what would it be? Stumped.
Can you ask that again?
I would say live meetings.
Yeah.
You know, just again, we've been talking a lot about the tech, and some of the conversations are good to do, like we're doing here, having a conversation. But sometimes when trying to present to larger groups and get a wider message out, doing that in front of a bunch of small blacked out boxes as people have their cameras off, it just it's difficult. So being in the room with folks and actually being able to read the room, interact, and kind of make sure that what you're presenting fits the room and it isn't just the script off the shelf kind of thing. So
I totally agree with that. I miss meeting my client, in person. So this is such of importance. Definitely.
I miss whiteboard sessions. I'm a big whiteboard guy. I like you guys see, I write all this stuff down. I have to put it in front of me to know what I'm really thinking, and it really helps me explore my thoughts. I miss that.
I think I'm a bad example here. I've worked from pretty much this desk for the last 10 years. So I don't have a office point of reference.
Right.
But Chris, you said something earlier that I really like and I don't want to go back to as the impersonal nature of communication. Seeing people in their home, in their bedroom, wherever they're planning or they had chosen to start that meeting, it has been great. I feel like I know a lot more about people in a lot of different ways than I would have prior to the advent of just SOP video conferences.
Right, I agree.
I think it was a toss-up between less anxiety being in person with humans. Would like to go back to not having that anxiety. And I sort of like the routine of going to work. I love working at home, and I intend to do that. And I've only committed to going back to one day work when our new building opens. But just that routine, there's something really satisfying about the routine. I don't like, waiting in traffic and driving in that, but just the routine of going into work, there is something stable about that gives differentiation of the same environment I see both before my work begins, during work, and after work.
That's true. That is true.
Last one. I guess this gives you an option to be either hopeful or resigned. If you have one hope or one expectation for 2022, what is it?
The expectation is that COVID won't go away. That's my expectation.
Is there a hope associated with that, Chris?
You know what? Actually, it's so interesting. All the things that we talked about, right? In any situation in the history of mankind, whatever happens, there are some people who benefit and some people who don't. There are some people who suffer and some people who thrive. Call it fate, call it the whim, call it cleverness, call it luck, call it perseverance or mindset, doesn't matter. These events are, I think, end up becoming what we make of them, right? And I love Ron's optimism about how it changes how we think about ourselves, and it makes us more, like I said, more pliant mentally, right? You can hold two disparate thoughts, and that's okay, right? Because that's how the world is. So yes, Doug, I think that it is a resignation and a hope, right? COVID's here to stay. All right. What are all the things that we can do to be the best that we can be to ourselves and each other, even if COVID's going to be here?
I would totally have to agree. I mean, my hope is that empathy would make a return to our species. It seems to be in short supply, not just in the U.S., but everywhere. And that would resolve a lot of issues, at least in my eye.
Excellent.
I hope to see the collaboration that I think kind of has helped us get through these kind of unique 18 months to 2 years continue. When things first happened, network and TV inventory, it was like everyone pulled back. So there was a need to be flexible there with cancellations and quite honestly, some forgiveness on rate and things like that, to where this year things tightened up. So there needed to be that collaboration of, hey, listen, I'm not, I'm not making up the rates and the information. It's just like this is the give and take of our industry, right? Like 20 was here, 21's there. It's like in order to get through it, it takes collaboration and an openness amongst partners, right? And it's not just who can win the most. It really is about really coming to terms on what's a win for both.
Right.
Mhm.
I can say my hope are the same as you guys with COVID. I hope that everybody said that we learn to live with it. It's really, that's it, coming back to a normal without the masks, right? At one point, hopefully.
I know.
I have enough of them. I have a huge collection at home. That's it.
I'd have to go with restrictions on travel. I'm hoping will ease quite a bit. One thing that I've definitely curtailed is traveling. I love, I think monocultures are, and I think that's a lot of what's happened is we're seeing the same exact people. We're not getting out and seeing a lot of different people or different cultures and traveling. And I would really, like those restrictions, and hopefully they will be lifted here in 2022 because I'd like to get back to doing that. I think that just makes us stronger and more resilient.
Totally agree.
Excellent.
That's great. Great stuff, everybody. I really appreciate it. A great array of concepts, ideas, thoughts. So we appreciate you. Thank you, Brand Response Council, not only the group that's here today, but the entire council for their efforts this year in creating these Take 20s. This is our 34th episode of Take 20 since it launched in July of 2020. And we're going to have another 25 or 26 next year. So we're looking for it. That's both a hope and an expectation. We're going to have 25 or 26 next year. Your next opportunity as an attendee to join us for a live online Take 20 episode is Wednesday, January 5th, 2022, as the Brand Response Council and guests take on the topic of hiring conundrums. Job migration is putting marketing talent at a premium. What can you expect from the shifting marketplace in 2022? Please visit thepdmi.com/take-20 to check out the upcoming schedule and register to attend today. We just updated that site yesterday. The next 5 sessions starting January 5th are there and ready for you to register for, so please do join us. Thanks again for checking out this episode of PDMI's Take 20. Thank you, Chris and the crew. Happy holidays to all. Be well. Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Happy holidays.